Be sure and tell them Large Marge sent ya.
In the 90s, we were just teeny tykes. We liked our movies and our bikes. We wanted to be DJs, but we were just teeny gals. So we went off to college and we remained as pals. 20 years later, we're still watching flicks and we're bringing you the feeling bit by bit. Sweetie and sweetie, we're here to say it's the Large Marge Santa's podcast. Hey.
Hey guys, welcome to the Large Marge Santa's podcast, your favorite podcast where two sweetie sisters talk about spooky movies that shaped their childhood. I'm Sweetie with a Y.
And I'm Sweetie with an IE.
And it's our last spooky season. We got it in. We did it.
We did it. I'm so proud of ourselves.
So we always do this. We make a plan and we don't check the availability of the streaming.
When will we learn?
So unfortunately this week we were slated to do something Wicked This Way Comes, which was not a movie either of us have ever really seen growing up, but I saw it semi recently for when I was doing my blog, so within 10 years anyways. But I know a lot of people have been asking for that, and it's definitely a childhood memory for a lot of people, childhood spooky memory for a lot of people. So I was excited to do it for y'all.
Yeah,
but,
I've never heard of it, but it looked really good, old school horror.
Yeah, but alas, not available. Not available to stream.
So rude.
So had to move on. So as usual, I gave Sweetie a list of my top picks. She picked the last one on the list as per usual. She always ixnays my regular ones, but tonight we decided to do the Blair Witch Project. Spooky.
From 1999.
From 1999. I was too young to see this when it came out in the movie theater, but our older sister, this is the story that I have, is that Liz, our older sister, came home from some event, and I don't think she even saw it, but her friend Shannon's mom or her aunt saw it and was like, "Oh my god, this is the scariest movie I've ever seen. You guys cannot watch this because you live on Cape Cod in the woods. It'll be too scary for you." And so that just intrigued me to no end when I was young. And I was like, I need to see this. I need to check this out. So I think I'm pretty sure I watched it many years later in our basement, which is where I did a lot of movies that I shouldn't have been watching.
Scandalous.
And I remember being very scared by it. And I for sure 110% was fooled by the ruse of this movie. And we'll get more into that later. But yeah, big deal, this movie.
Yeah, so I was 16 years old, prime audience for this movie. And I feel like this is my story. I have a memory that my friend... Okay, so this movie, I just feel like there should be a category for horror movies that are really kind of geared towards teenagers, and you should be able to see them. All rated R, you have to be 17, right? Yeah. So that misses at least half the kids in high school. So I feel like some horror movies should be 14 and up so kids in high school can see them. Just because you're missing out on this stuff. Case in point, Blair Witch. So this is a movie that they would, I guess, ID you. And so a lot of kids couldn't see it. But my friend had a connection at the movie theater and knew someone who could sneak us in. So we could, I guess, buy tickets for something else and then they were IDing at the door. I don't even know. I mean, really,
this could just be a Sweetie story that never happened,
right?
And she thinks
so.
It did,
I'm not even sure, but I'm pretty sure I saw it in the movie theater, which would be wild for me because, if you've listened to this podcast, I was scaredy cat central
for some reason
of horror movies, but I knew this one wasn't gory, and I think that's why I was like, okay, I'll see it. Is this jump scares? Is this just creepy? I'll do it. And it was still really scary. I think a huge part of this movie is the environment that you watch it in. So if you're in a dark theater, which a bunch of other teenagers who are also scared and freaking out, that is going to feed your freak outness.
I don't think it was just teen. I mean, I think it was a global phenomenon. I don't think it was just teenagers.
If my memory serves me right, when we saw this movie, it was almost everyone from our high school.
We don't know if your memory serves you right.
But the hype with this is what really drove this movie to be what it was. And it was sort of like a first time that a mass marketing campaign was really used to fuel
Or viral marketing.
Yeah, or viral. I mean, this is pre-internet, basically. I mean, the internet did exist in 1999, but like, what did we use it for? To Ask Jeeves, like
to read about the Blair Witch Project and be like, what is the? Yeah, I mean, that's how. This is my prime.
I don't remember
internet.
Googling things in 1999.
I was like
were?
doing stuff, like looking up the site, like checking out the site. Like,
AOL
who are these
Instant
people?
Messenger. That's what I was doing.
Well, sure, like part of that. I mean, I don't know. I don't think Instant Messenger was around then, but Chat House was, which is the program that I used, which was just like you type in a chat and then you like hit send, and then like all the chats refresh, and it would I forget what that's called, like a scrolling chat interface or whatever. But those are the good old days.
I don't know. I'm sure anyway, so huge viral marketing campaign. They acted like this was a real story. So you had real film students going out into the woods, and they never came back. Like legit disappeared.
Well, the gist is that students went into the woods to film a documentary. They were never found, but their footage was. So the idea was that this movie was their found footage. And this was really one of the earliest cases of found footage. Not the first, definitely. Definitely. And I think, so I mean, the appeal there is that we go to see these horror movies, but we always know that like they're not real. So there's always an element there that's like not as scary as it could be. So the lure of found footage is that you're making yourself believe that this is real and did happen, and it adds another level of scary and terror onto that. So that's like the appeal, right? And I think that's what a lot of people were really buying into. It was like, it wasn't that. I mean, it could something that could happen. People could get lost in the woods, and then we find their footage, and maybe there's something spooky on it. So that was the dream, and they really fed it to us. Like, we'll talk more about this, but 2 weeks before this movie came out, there was a documentary on the Sci-Fi Channel called "Curse of the Blair Witch," and I stumbled upon that late one night, and it seemed so real. It seemed like a cheesy, like 90s documentary that like an unsolved mysteries type of thing. I totally 100% bought into it. I was like, this is fucked up. This is so scary. I was so scared. And I really probably didn't realize that it was not real until the stars of this movie showed up at the VMAs or whatever. And you were like, oh, Kurt Loder, what? Like, these are real people? And it just really shook us all. So, I mean, once that happened, found footage became like the genre in the horror world, right?
What are other found footage movies?
Like Paranormal Activity, Wreck, which is a Spanish movie where they remade into Quarantine, I think, in English. There's a bunch of them. One of the first earliest major ones was called Cannibal Holocaust, which was like very
title.
Yeah, very bad. It's not a good movie, but like it's very controversial. They killed like some actual animals in it, which people are not happy about. But the thing about that was that they almost got shut down because somebody thought that this was like an actual movie, like someone's actual footage of people. And there's a scene where they come across this woman who's like impaled on a stick or whatever, and the movie people were like so convinced that was real. They're like, bring that actress to us right now and show us that she exists, because I think you really killed her and she's dead. And then they brought the actress out and they showed them how they did it, and they like put her on. It's like a stick with a bicycle seat on it, and then she held the other part of the stick in her mouth, and that's how they made it look like that. But that was like how this, everybody has wanted to achieve that since then. Like, let's fool the movie people to think that like this really happened. So this Blair Witch was like the next time that happened, and it was pretty earth shattering, and it really changed the game.
Yeah, definitely. So this movie, very cheap to make. You watch it, you understand why, because it's basically they use the actors to do like all of the filming. So that's very cheap. They use handheld, camcorders and stuff like that for most of the shots. They spent $60,000 to make it, and it made $248 million. So at that point, it was in the Guinness Book of World Records in terms of like how much you spent versus how much you make, like that ratio. It was as the record holder then. I don't know if it has like something has since beat it 1999. So we're talking about 20 years here. 20 plus years. Oh my God. So that's crazy. But yeah, huge movie at the time. Everyone was talking about it. I mean, I think when I maybe theoretically went to go see it, again, we're not sure if I saw it or not in the theaters. The jig was up. Like, we knew it wasn't real, but it was still like very scary. As I said, everyone was really into it. And then to the point that the directors actually ran with this, even with the cast, like trying to convince them that at least the Blair Witch legend was real, to like make them even more freaked out when they were filming, which is kind of crazy that you're not even revealing like to your cast members what like the real situation is. So I find that very interesting. Anyway, so who's in this movie? You know, not really
Nobody.
anyone famous,
Well,
which
that
I
was the
think
point.
was the point. Yep. You know, that would, I think, have taken the film to like a totally different level. So you have, and everyone plays their names are their character names. So you have Heather Donahue, Michael C. Williams, and Joshua Leonard. So three college age average Joes. Then you have like a bunch of townspeople who the actors thought were actual real townspeople of this town, Burkittsville. And they were actually plants by the director. They were actors too. So, but yeah, no one of note. The directors are Daniel Myrick and Eduardo Sanchez. So didn't really ring a bell. They have done some other horror movies.
Well, I mean, that's the whole point. Like, you didn't need to know that you weren't supposed to really know there was like a director, right? Like,
Right.
If you were smart, you would watch this movie, and then the very first thing in the credits is like directed by these two people, which should have made people put two and two together immediately. But I think at IMDb, it was like a lot of people didn't notice that.
I mean, they didn't, like I said, like most of the job was done by the actors. I mean, they literally gave the cameras to the actors, put them in the woods and said, film some shit. And like, that's what they did. There was like loose direction, but everything
No,
is
they
like,
had to. They had like a bot. They would give them. They had a GPS. They had a walkie-talkie that was like connected to the production team or whatever, who were like some ways away from them in the woods. And then they would get to their point they needed to be, that had like a box in it, and the box would have like the store, like tonight you're supposed to go to bed, and then you're gonna wake up in the middle of the night and hear some noises in the woods, and so like that's it. And then they kind of just all improv'd.
But in terms of like traditional direction, where if someone like, you know, you're going with a script, you're going from the guys
no
in your
scripts,
face the whole time being like, do this, do
improvised,
this.
yeah.
Like they were kind of on their own. So I did look up, Eduardo Sanchez has done some directing of other kind of horror movie TV or
Sorry, baby was playing with my phone before. I don't know what's happening.
either horror movies or horror TV. And I just saw one of the episodes he directed was of Yellow Jackets.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so that's kind of a cool recent
Love Yellow
connection.
Jackets.
Yeah, great show. So I'm glad Eduardo's still working there. Of the actors, so Heather Donahue apparently received a ton of backlash after this role and quit acting in 2008 and was like, fuck this, and went into medical cannabis. Good for her. That's a worthy pursuit for sure. Michael C. Williams, I saw he was still working. He does, you know, random bits of TV here and there. I didn't see the other guy, Josh, was doing anything really. But yeah, they were just like regular Joes, and then they were famous, and everyone's like, whoa, you're not dead. And then they kind of weren't famous again.
No, yeah.
Kind of crazy.
Yeah, it's just a real whirlwind experience. Yeah. But yeah, we'll get into it. Obviously, different opinions, I'm sure, will arise. But I think it's still a solid entry into the horror movie category. I think it's also, and I always forget this every time I watch it, but it does take place like on Halloween or like Halloween weekend. So it's actually a perfect movie to watch during the Halloween season.
Yeah, even though we watch all these creepy movies, not that many of them take place during Halloween. Right. So I do really appreciate that.
Yeah. Totes. All right. Okay, well, let's do it.
All right. It's time for the sweetie synopsis. Yes, sweeties. Josh! That part like really messed me up. When she was screaming so loud. She's holding the camcorder and she's screaming.
It messed you up, like you were scared, or like you were
scared, but also that is so loud.
Oh, yeah. Well, you guys also turn the volume up very loud on your TV because you don't put the sound bar in that I gave you. But yeah, it's very loud, and I think that's what makes it spooky and scary.
Okay.
Anyways, yeah. So Heather, Josh, and Michael, aka Mikey, are setting off into the woods to film a documentary. This is Heather's baby, essentially, and she's making a documentary on this legendary Blair Witch of Burkittsville, Maryland. She's a film student. I believe Josh is as well. I'm not sure. Mikey, they seem to just like hire kind of like last minute to join the group, so he doesn't have like a pre-established relationship with them, but he brings the DAT, which is like this format for video, I guess.
Yeah, they kept saying that, and I
forget what it stands for, but it's like some audio, I don't know, something. Okay. But they rent it, I guess, so they have to get it back. So the whole thing was that they're gonna just like go there this weekend, camp in the woods, and like shoot some things, hopefully maybe see some spooky things, and then come back. That does not quite turn out to be the case. So the movie opens with the three of them, starting their trip. They go grocery shopping. They're talking about the plan. They're all excited. They start interviewing townsfolk. They meet this like real spooky lady, Mary Brown, who is like, which is funny because my mom knew a woman named Mary Brown when she worked at the newspaper, and she was the sweetest lady. So it's just funny that, not that Mary Brown's a super uncommon name, but so they hear these legends. So you hear about like this supposed like Blair Witch character who is like this old woman who was like convicted of witchcraft or something and like fled into the woods to like flee persecution. So like a couple of like terrible things happen throughout history, and people think it's like because of this Blair Witch that is why it happens. So the main like cornerstones of this legend are that like children go missing in the woods. Some people went on a search party. Some guys went on a search party to find them, and then apparently those guys ended up eviscerated and with like their guts like tied to one another like on this rock. And then when they came back to like get someone to help, they were gone. And then like in the 40s, 10 kids disappeared, and it turned out to be like some weird guy who had a house in the woods who like killed them all and then came to town and was like, well, I'm done with that. And like some weird shit. And like apparently the Blair Witch told him to do it or something. So those are like the legends that go around. And Mary Brown says that she saw the Blair Witch, and it was like this woman who was covered in hair, which is like so creepy. And like she says, like horse hair, which is like not super long hair, but like that kind of hair where like I know you're hairy, but like you're not. I don't know. It just like that always really freaked me out. Anyways, so they start off on their trek into the woods. So far, so good. They get to like their first location. Nothing too spooky really happens. The first like major thing they're trying to find is this like the cemetery that like marked the graves of the kids that were missing or something like that. And I think
was it Coffin Rock?
Well, or like Coffin Rock was one of the first places, which is where those men were like gutted and tied together. So nothing too spooky happens there until they find like these little what are those like how do you say that? CAIRNS? Cairns, or like those rock formations that you see often when you're hiking. Yeah. They look like that, but apparently they were supposed to be like these like gravestones. Josh or someone knocks one over, and supposedly this is like the start of when things get like spooky, is that like they unsettled like the environment and like whatever. So that night they're camping, and I guess we don't hear this, but the next night they're filming, and they're like, we heard some crazy noises last night. Like Josh is like, I heard somebody like screaming or something spooky. Someone cackling. And so first you're like, ooh, that's kind of spooky, but we didn't hear it. So we're like, I don't know if I believe that. So, I mean, I'll believe it when I see it or hear it. So then they start kind of to get a little bit lost at this point. And Heather knows where they're going, or so she says. She has this map. But the guys are just really dubious about it. And they're like, I don't trust you. Like, I don't think we're going the right way. So they're already starting to have these like threads of discord in their group, right? Which is something you never want to have when you're together hiking in the woods, because it's important that you stick together,
right? Essentially.
But things really start to go south. So then like the next night they're camping, they do get the cameras when they start hearing something. And this sound is like someone snapping like big sticks in the woods on like, and it's coming from like all sides of them. So you hear this noise, and it's very unnatural sounding, I would say. It reminds me of that scene in The Exorcist when the mom is like going up in the basement, and she like hears those like weird flapping kind of wing noises, and you're like, I just don't really know what that is, and you never really find out what it is, but it's just such an unsettling noise because you don't know what's making that noise. So that part's scary, and like they're starting to get freaked out. And Mikey's definitely the one that's like probably the most scared. That like he's trying to put on a brave face, but you're like, that dude is scared. Like he's shitting his pants right now. And Heather wants to get everything on tape, so she's always has her camera ready at moment's notice. So then the next very scary thing that happens is they get lost officially.
I mean, they're by the second day they're lost.
They're lost.
So it was only supposed to be a weekend trip, right?
So
because
they're on
they
their
leave
way
on
back
Friday. They're supposed to come back on Sunday. They got to work on Monday, or Mikey does because the other one's in school. And they're really lost, and they end up
they have to camp again.
Yeah, they have to camp again. They end up hiking all day in the wrong direction.
Right.
They keep fighting.
They lose the map. The map's missing.
Yeah,
there's a fight about that.
There's
you
a lot
find
of
out
drama.
that like Mikey threw the map in the creek. He's like, I threw that dumb map out. He didn't think it was useful. And
at this point, I don't think they have any food. They have only brought rations,
what
let's say,
was
for
all
a couple
that,
days.
The food they went grocery shopping for.
They ate it all. They only like planned to. This wasn't like some crazy hike. I don't know how big these woods are, but they had only planned to be gone for 2 or 3 days. Like they only kind of brought enough food for that, and they're kind of done. They thought that last day, okay, we'll eat all our food and go, because I think with your camping too, you don't want to like haul shit. So you're gonna kind of eat it all so you can leave room, lighten up your pack. And then they thought they were out of there. Turns out, no.
So then they come to, I think I forget if this is before or after they realize that they walked in a circle. So they decide to just like walk south because they figure that like these woods aren't too big. They have to hit the edge of somewhere. It might not be where their car is parked, but at least they'll get out of these fucking woods. So after a day of walking south, they somehow have managed to come back right where they started, which is like super spooky, and they're like really freaked out about it. And then they see all these hanging things in the tree, these like little figures. And this is like the logo of the Blair Witch. It's like, looks like a little person like hanging, and then there's all different size ones. There's like a huge one. So it's not just like, it couldn't have been just like random stick formations, like something or someone put these there.
Yeah, it looks witchy.
It looks very witchy. And I guess you find out, and you don't realize this at the time, that like Heather took one of those and like put it in her bag, and then they find out later like, okay, maybe that's really what upset the Blair Witch. So from that point on, things really escalate, and in the middle of the night, like something like shakes their tent. They run out of the tent. They hear children around them and like a screaming in the distance. They get spooked. They run.
I don't know if I would feel more comfortable outside.
I know.
The tent
I was kind of like, whoa. Well, if the noises were getting louder, they just like went.
And someone can sneak up behind you.
I don't know. They tried. They're filming things that you don't hear anything. They end up just like staying in place for like an hour in the woods, and like until like daylight comes, and then they slowly go back to their tent. Back in their tent, there's like now like 3 rock formations out on the outskirts of where their tent was, and so that's like really freaking them out. So just things are just like really escalating. And then like the next night they're still lost. They have to camp again. They all hate each other. They're blaming each other. They think they're going to die. And then Josh, in the middle of the night, I guess, is gone. So they wake up. Heather and Mikey wake up, and Josh isn't there. And so they're like, where the fuck is Josh? So they are screaming for him. Sweetie did a good reenactment of that earlier, of just like, Josh! And they're just like yelling for him. They can't find him. So they're like, we just have to keep going. Like, he must have just like left, or we don't know. It's no point in this. We just have to go on. So they go on, and then I think they camp that night, and then they hear in the middle of the night what sounds like Josh screaming, help me. And it's like super creepy, and you're like, is that Josh? Is someone tricking us? They're like trying to yell back, but they're not getting anything. So then the next morning, there's like a bundle of sticks outside their tent, and it's like wrapped in a piece of Josh's like flannel shirt that he was wearing. And Heather's just like really freaking out, and she like doesn't want to open it, but then she goes back and opens it, and it's like teeth.
What
a
is
clump
it?
of hair.
It's so hard to tell, and I think that's the trick of this whole movie.
Yeah, it's
just like with like any good horror movie. I mean, this is talked about with Jaws, right? Like it's scarier when you don't see the shark because you're imagining like what it is. So I think on purposely they make stuff very vague because they want your mind to race. Be like, what is that? Is that is that a tongue? Is that teeth? Is that his nose? Is that like, you're just imagining the worst and they want
I guess
you
it really
your mind
was.
to do it.
It was someone's tooth in real life.
Yeah.
It, like someone had gone to the dentist and was like, "Give me a tooth you extracted."
In my mind, I saw it as teeth and a tongue. The red thing was a tongue.
There's something. Yeah, I always thought it was like a piece of a liver or something. I don't know.
Oh, okay.
No, I think it's
See,
a tooth.
like you thought
it's a
liver.
tooth.
I thought
tooth,
tongue.
and then there's like a clump of his hair, which was actually like Josh's real hair, I guess. And so they're super freaked out. Yes, they're super freaked out now. They walk further into the woods, kind of getting dark again, and then they stumble upon a house. So they're following now the sound of like Josh's voice screaming, and it leads them to this house in the woods, just like random fucking derelict house in the woods, like super creepy. They go in there, there's like handprints all over the wall and these like weird runes on the wall, and it's very scary. So earlier, I think you did hear the legend of the guy. So the guy that killed the kids in the 40s, the way that he did it would like, he would put the kids in the basement, like with their backs to each other, and he would like kill one of them and then the other one after that.
But
so
they'd make the kids all face the wall,
right,
like, and not look at
and not look at
the other kids,
right? Which is interesting. And so that's kind of like in the back of your head. So they're running up and down this house. You still hear Josh like screaming in this house, but you don't see him. So you're like, what the fuck is happening? And you can't really see anything. Obviously, this is all shaky camera work throughout this whole last half of the movie. Mikey runs downstairs, and then he like something happens to him, and his camera falls to the ground. Heather's behind him, and then her camera gets like a glimpse of Mikey like standing with his back to her, and he's like facing the wall. And Heather just like lets out this like enormous scream, and then something hits her camera, falls to the ground, and then that's it. Cut to black. The movie's over. So that was like the famous ending I heard around the world, like so chaotic and just like you don't know what's going on. And that's it. So really crazy stuff. I think that, yeah, just like you said, like this movie just plays on what Jaws was doing, which is just like it's scarier in your head than trying to find it. And did you read that? So like in the part where they get spooked out of their tent and they run into the woods, Heather at some point is like, what the fuck is that? What the fuck is that? And I guess they had meant to have a quick glimpse of the Blair Witch or somebody like in the woods, but the Josh or Mikey forgot to pan the camera to like look at that person. He was just like so freaked out that he just kept running. So they don't have it, and I'm really glad actually because I think
I could have used a glimpse.
I bet it would have been. I bet it would have been corny.
Crappy,
I think at that point people would have known that like it was not real.
Because the way they ended it, you're like, okay, is it the witch or is it the ghost of the murderer guy? Because then, like, why did it end in the house with like that? But she made him do that, so it's all connected.
So that's the whole thing. Yeah. Okay. So it's like he only did that for her. So obviously she's like playing to that what they knew and like tricking them and then luring them there by using Josh's voice to get them there, kind of thing. But spooky stuff. I mean, it still spooks me. I still get like very like stirred by this movie. It's still something about it just freaks me out. And I think I just like I've had a lot of like nighttime. The woods are scary. Like you always hear weird noises. Last night I kept hearing the door like outside of my room kept like creaking, and I was like, is there a ghost? Like I don't know. And I was so freaked out. And so like your mind plays tricks on you, you know, like I can totally see. I mean, I would be terrified to do this, like as an actor even. And I think that they were too. And you can see that comes across like real. In their performances. They thought it
was a real
No, I mean,
legend.
they knew.
They thought it
to
was
a
real.
point, but like I don't think they knew like what was. Yeah.
So I guess that the directors too also made them sign a contract that was like, you agreed to be totally fucked with, like. We are gonna like mess
so
with
like
your
they
mind.
and then I guess they came and like shook their tent in that part, and the actors didn't know that was gonna happen, kind of thing. So like they did stuff like that, and the noises I don't think they knew. They didn't tell them like we're gonna go break a bunch of big sticks in the woods and like make weird noises. So they didn't know any of that.
Yeah, I mean I would definitely be scared too. I mean I think this movie, a lot of it has to do with how you watch it, where you watch it, the sound. Are the lights on or the lights off? I mean, I think this is a very much like, what is your environment when you're watching this kind of movie? Because I think that really plays into it. I did not find this movie scary at all, and I'll give you a couple of reasons why. First off, watched it in complete light. It was not dark. I was watching it with Sweet-eyed Jimmy, so I wasn't like Sweetie here by herself in a house. I would be scared to death if I was by myself in a house watching this movie by myself. Sure. Thirdly, we watched it with commercials. Okay, if you're getting broken up every 5 minutes to watch like a prescription drug commercial, yeah, it's really gonna kill like the sequence and the vibe. Because it takes you out of the story, right? So that's why movies don't have freaking commercials, because you need to be like immersed in it. So that's, I think, part of the reason why I like appreciate this movie completely for what it is. I think it was monumental at the time. I think they did something so different, and they used such like, it was a completely low budget. They used like there weren't any effects really. And they were able to scare the shit out of people. So it just goes to show that like you really don't need all this, hoopla, gore, or whatever to, CGI, blah, 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 to really like scare the shit out of people. It can be really, really simple stuff. So I love that about it. And I personally do not find this movie this scary, but camping in the woods that there might be a sketchy witch. Yeah, I wouldn't do that for sure. No.
Well, just, that and just like the added tension of like being lost. Like, I don't know if you've ever been lost, or like Sweetie did a lot of hiking trips. And there's often times where like at some point you have to just like trust that hopefully you're going the right way, and then at some point maybe you realize you're going the wrong way, and it's devastating to have to be like, now we have to do like, I'll go all the way back. Like,
I've never been in a life or death situation.
Feel their frustration, but you can really feel like their frustration and like their panic in that moment, and how they all turn on each other, and it just gets like,
well, that was part of it too. It got to be like Lord of the Flies like level, like, oh my god, you're like attacking like people who are like your buddies, because you're just like in this dire situation. They gang up on this Heather, who sadly is like the only woman, so that part kind of is like kind of a bummer. They kind of pull like the dude cards, I feel like, a little bit, and her character is a little bit more of like the uppity know-it-all woman, so that is kind of a bummer. And part of me was like, well, like why is it a girl in that role? Like, could it have been a man? Like, what would that have been like? And then they do this thing with the characters where they have like one guy, Josh, is the peacemaker, and then you have Mikey and Heather were always sort of like against each other from the beginning, and then like the roles kind of reverse, and they do like all this stuff with the characters. So it's like neat in that way too. I guess like in real life, Josh and Heather didn't get along, and it was like reversed. And a lot of the fighting was like real. Just interesting like little things like that. I guess like the directors, like Sweetie said, would leave a box, and they had a GPS and instructions for the day and like what they were supposed to film, and like loosely like the script. But they would give them food too, and every day they would give them a little less food, so they would be on edge and hungry as like the shoot wore on, so that by the end, when they're shooting the really difficult scenes, they are actually hungry because they've basically been like starved. Jeez, kind of some method acting shit.
I mean, it really works. Again, I find it very convincing. When you watch found footage films today, everyone just feels like an actor. Like, no one has been able to like get that like genuine feeling that this movie brings to it, I think, since like I honestly have not seen a found footage movie that is as convincing as this.
But like, did this ruin found footage movies for almost all the other ones that came after it? Because wasn't everyone be skeptical? I mean, it's kind of like that's not real.
Well, that's kind of like a obvious side effect of that, right? Because you can't, at some point you have to be like, there can't be these many found footage movies where someone has been found. So really like the first couple that do this are the ones that are going to make the splash, and the other ones are just now a genre that like isn't real, but you're trying to recreate that. I feel like every found footage movie after this was just trying to create what you felt when you were watching the Blair Witch Project.
What if someone comes along and is real though? No one's going to believe
that would be
it.
Grounded. That would be the next step. That would be like the final act, or like the final step of that, or the life cycle of that. But just like people are always so interested in like real life. You know, there's something to say for like when like rubbernecking on the highway when there's like a car accident. Like people love to just like see what's going on there, what's going on there. So the second that like you feel like this is a real thing, you're more interested in it because of that. So they're really like
true crime. Whoa,
right? So exactly. So I think that's like where a lot of that comes from. So again, I was 100% convinced because of this sci-fi documentary that I watched like late night or whatever. So convincing. They had like Heather's like prom pictures, like just like all this shit. They just like the guys that they interviewed were just like the guys that would be on like episodes of Unsolved Mysteries, and it was just like so well done. So I went back and I watched that documentary. It's available on YouTube, I think, or even just like streaming. It's called The Curse of the Blair Witch, and it talks more about the events that you hear in the beginning of this movie. So you go into deeper detail of like the mythos and the different things. You see some drawings which really rattled me, and for a while I thought that like those drawings were in the Blair Witch Project, like in the movie. And I didn't realize until I watched this documentary recently that I was like, oh, that's where I remembered those drawings from. And those stuck with me when I was watching the actual movie, and it made it scarier. There's this one pencil drawing of like this witch with like a open cloak, and she has like these like things sticking out of her head, and it's like it's just like it's really scary. And so I think I've just like always like envisioned that of like some scary old witch in the woods. But it really brought me back, that documentary. I was like, I remember this so well. Like I was fooled. And then I remember that year at the VMAs, like they were there, and I was like, what? And I was like, damn, trust nobody, trust no one. But again, really groundbreaking, solid stuff. I'll always enjoy this movie. I think it holds up. And I think a lot of horror people agree. This is the caliber of found footage that should be. I
was disappointed that they made sequels to this that ended up being kind of more Hollywood. You know, obviously the found footage aspect was either more like Hollywood made to look like found footage, but really wasn't. And that, I don't know how many sequels there were, but that was a bummer. That kind of
a couple, and then there was a more recent one too that supposedly was not that bad. So I have that one that was called like Blair Witch, not the Blair Witch Project, but just like Blair Witch. And then like Blair Witch 2: Book of Shadows is like a joke, pretty much. Like it's really embarrassing. I have seen that, but yeah, nothing's come close to this.
Yeah, that's just silly.
Yeah.
I want to bring up the this like in what were we watching recently about? Oh, Dangerous Minds, also taking place in the mid to late 90s there. The how much smoking was in it, and how I really do remember this time in the late 90s that smoking was considered really cool. Like if you were cool, you smoked. Like I remember our sister smoked. You know, she was in high school, she smoked. Like her friends smoked, they were cool. By the time I got into high school, and I feel like it wasn't that cool, it was on its way out by then, and thank God. But like, what was the messaging? Like, what happened in the 90s? Because I feel like they knew all about the dangers of tobacco. Like it
was just 90s. How they marketed the cigarettes to kids, and it was a very cool thing. And like you see characters like smoking. Yeah. I still think smoking looks very cool.
It does look cool.
I've always been intrigued by that, and I would love. I never did because I was afraid.
You know, smoking in the not in the tent because she wasn't allowed to smoke in the tent, but like smoking when they're camping, and then like Mikey like. He's like freaking out at the end, but he's like, at least I found my cigarettes. I found 2 cigarettes at the bottom of my bag. So he was like chain smoking, like, but just like took me back to like being like, yeah, like, wow, like cool kids smoke. Yeah. And like, I'm like, dang, they got me. Those tobacco guys got me.
No, they did it.
Thinking it was cool. And then, so, excuse me. Sweetie said, it's not funny. I don't know why I'm laughing. I'm like a big hiker. I've done a lot of hikes. Sweet-eyed Jimmy and I go on a lot of hikes. And I will to this day, like you see some wicked, like shady shit in the woods all the time. Like I've seen that Blair Witch, those dolls or like weird wood structures or whatever in the woods sometimes. And your mind just goes Blair Witch, Blair Witch. I swear to God, like you just, whenever you see the rock piles, like it's just something that'll always make you think of this.
But
movie.
those are like hiking things.
Yeah.
Like when you're hiking, you add a stone onto it. Like that's
Yeah.
how those get built.
No. Yeah, definitely. But I've definitely seen like wood sculptures or weird stuff in trees. Like, I don't know. Wasn't there also, this reminds me of True Detective? Wasn't there a kind of weird wood sculptures in that movie
Similar.
that was kind of, sort of witchy or whatever was going on? Who even remembers
a little bit.
what the deal was with that killer? But yeah, I don't know.
He was a pedophile.
He was a pedophile. So yeah, always takes me back to the Blair Witch. It's gonna get ya. Huh? Scary sticks. That's
They are very
exactly what
scary.
it is. Sticks are scary.
The giant one that was like all mossy. Like
This
what was
movie
that?
made sticks wicked scary.
Well done.
I know.
Good job.
Just a harmless stick. Ah! It's gonna get you.
Yeah. Good stuff.
But yeah, I think like for sure when like Josh was screaming out of the tent, that's when it really escalates. Because the whole movie's kind of like, this is like borderline. Oh, like that's a little creepy. That's a little weird, but it could be this. It could be that. And then you want to think like part of it is them thinking also like they don't believe that this legend is real. You know, they're trying to convince themselves that it isn't, and they think it's like actual people, you know, messing with them or trying to hurt them or something like that. So I think like you do that too. What was the slime on his bag?
I think that was like, because he's the one that knocked over the rock pile or whatever. So they think that like he was marked by like the witch or something. So the slime was like on his bag of like, so that's why he got taken like first. I guess like no one knew that was going to happen, and Josh didn't even either until he got his instructions for that day that were like in the middle of the night when everyone's sleeping, like leave the tent,
What?
like you're dead or something.
You're dead.
And, like, that's how they found out. But yeah, I'm surprised you didn't read any of this. I read the trivia for one, like all of it. And it has that all in there, but you didn't
read the thing about Josh, but I got all the others.
All right.
Check my notes.
Jace. All right. Well, anything else we want to talk about?
No, that's it. Adios, spooky month.
Spooky. Always love a spooky month.
Yeah.
I've always wanted to do Donnie Darko, which is actually also a good Halloween movie, which also takes place during Halloween season. So maybe we'll do that next year.
Great.
I don't know.
Save it. Save it. We're running out, you know.
Well,
slowly
hopefully
but surely running out of Halloween
do
stuff.
something
so.
wicked this way comes for once. So
I like to do that. I'd like to do the Olsen twins.
yeah,
Double.
That was
tail
the other
trouble.
one I suggested. Sweetie, ixnayed that one.
Save them for next year.
But good times, yeah. All right, well, have a spooky Halloween, you guys. Come find us on Twitter at The Sweetie Club or on Instagram at Large Marge Sent Us. Thank you, as always, for listening. Bye. Ciao.